Welcome to the Montana State Capitol. This building was built in 1899 and completed in 1902, but Montana became a state in 1889. It took us about 10 years to get our ducks in a row before construction could actually begin. Montana had become a territory in 1864, and the original territorial capital was in Bannock, and then it moved to Virginia City, and in 1875 it moved to Helena, kind of following the discovery of gold, and as gold was playing out in Bannock, moving it to Virginia City, moving it to Helena. So it just happened to be Helena when Montana became a state. But that didn't necessarily guarantee that the capital city was going to stay in Helena. And it came down to a vote in 1892, and it really became a battle between the Copper Kings, William A. Clark and Marcus Daly. And Clark was vying for Helena, basically just to spite Daly. They weren't really friendly. And Daly wanted it to be in Anaconda. And so millions of dollars were supposedly spent stuffing ballot boxes and buying votes. There's one story that the votes in Helena came back twice as many votes as there are people. But finally the people had had enough, and they said, look, we need a building, we need a physical representation of our statehood. So this was 1894. They said, it's in Helena, just leave it in Helena, build the building already. And then, so they got a committee together to decide plans, architects, location, all of that. And this first committee had plans to put together a $1 million building. And then somebody found out that they also had plans to put half of that money in their own pockets. So somebody blew the whistle on them, and they were disbanded and all of the paperwork destroyed. A second committee was put together, and they hired architects John Kent and Charles Bell from Iowa, and had them relocate their families to Montana to fulfill the requirement that the architects be Montanans, and construction finally began in 1899. When it was finished, it became the first Capitol building in the country to be built with electricity, as well as steam radiator heat, elevators, and indoor bathrooms with flush toilets. We are now in the Rotunda, which is kind of the very center of the Capitol building, and some people call it the crown jewel of the Capitol. It basically means round room, and it's an excellent place to see all of the restoration work that had to be done from floor to ceiling. In 1999, the state and the citizens of Montana decided to put forth some of their tax money to restoring their capital to its original grandeur. So the floor that we're standing on in it is an exact replica of the tile floor that was put in 1902. With the exception of the blue tile. Originally that was blue glass that let light onto the first floor. The marble is original. The red and green on the walls all had to be repainted. In 1900, they had hired an interior decorating firm out of Cincinnati, Ohio, called F. Pedretti and Sons. And these guys were known for doing mural work and stained glass work. And so hiring them, we kind of got a 2-for-1 deal. As I had mentioned earlier, it was important that the Capitol get decorated with images that depicted moments in Montana history. And our governor at the time, Joseph K. Toole, was kind of the end-all vote. And so it was really what he saw as important in Montana history. So keeping those things in mind as like looking through lenses when you look at history, and keeping in mind that the Pedrettis were predominantly decorators, not historians. So here in the Rotunda we have 4 murals that are original, and I call them the stock Montana characters. We have the cowboy, the Indian, the miner, and the mountain man. And 3 of them are actually historic figures. One of them is not. Our mountain man, Jim Bridger, was a famous fur trapper and trader in the area in the 1830s. Henry Edgar is our miner, and he was one of the men who discovered gold near Bannock in 1862, which spurred the gold rush into Montana from the California-Nevada gold fields. And our Native American is Chief Charlo, who was a Salish chief who refused to move his people onto a reservation until the late 1880s, and in that respect held out for quite a while, but never became quite as famous as, say, Sitting Bull or Chief Joseph. And then when it came time to pay the cowboy, I'm not sure if the governor did not denote who that cowboy should be, or if the Pedrettis, it got lost in the mail kind of a thing. But rumor has it the Pedrettis dressed up one of the brothers like a cowboy and made him look as rough and tough as they could, and were probably referencing a book about the Southwest and figured all of the West looked like Arizona. So our cowboy certainly looks like he's not standing in Montana. The dome from here is about 90 feet off of the second floor here, and it's not the same. The ceiling to the dome you see here is not the same dome as you see on the outside of the building. They kind of sit on each other like a shell almost. I think it's 35 feet between the top of this ceiling and the outside dome. And part of that was structural, but the original plans for the building called for a shorter, much more modest dome, and the powers that be at the time decided they wanted a stronger, more imposing dome. And so they had an argument with the architects about it, and the architects said no, it would throw off the aesthetics of the building, and so they basically fired them and hired a couple architects that would build the dome that they wanted, and then the Kent and Bell took their design to South Dakota and sold it to South Dakota. So if you go to the Capitol in Pierre, it looks pretty much just like this one with the smaller dome. We are now on the top of the steps on the third floor. We mentioned the Pedrettis down in the Rotunda and how they were hired to do mural work as well as stained glass. And so right here on the third floor is our barrel vault ceiling, and at the top of the stairs is more stained glass done by the Pedrettis. The glass at the top of the stairs is completely original. It was never removed, but in the 60s, as part of their remodeling and modernization of the building, they removed the barrel vault ceiling. The interesting thing was that during the 60s, when they took all this stuff out, they didn't save any of it. They sold 99% of it off at an auction. And so this restoration talk was happening during the 1990s, and during that time, Montana was also in the process of acquiring what is now Virginia City and Nevada City properties, which had all been the collection of a state senator named Charles Bovee, who was a brilliant pack rat. Some people collect shoes, some people collect bottle caps. He collected Gold Rush era buildings, and now Nevada City and Virginia City are testament to that collection. And he had purchased a lot of the stuff out of the Capitol, including some panels of glass in one of the original beams from this ceiling. As state employees were going through the inventory of all the stuff they'd recently acquired with the purchase of that estate, they found several panels of glass in one of the original beams. And from that, they were able to reconstruct the ceiling entirely. Also at the top of the stairs, we have a painting by a man named Amandi Julin, and this painting was a gift to the state of Montana from the Northern Pacific Railroad. And the painting itself denotes the driving of the Golden Spike in 1883, which completed the Northern Pacific Railroad, making it the second transcontinental railroad in the United States, and drastically changed the way that Montana was developing. All of a sudden, you could get people and things in and out 10 times faster than you could before. It also marked the first time that a former president made a public appearance. At that time, our presidents did not receive a pension or any kind of retirement fund. They had to go back to work just like everyone else. And so in the painting is Ulysses S. Grant, who at the time was very badly in debt and dying of throat cancer. So he gladly accepted the $2,000 offered, came out, smiled pretty for the camera, and the artist made him look a little healthier than he did that day. He didn't actually pound in any spikes himself. The other thing that we have up here is our Mike Mansfield statue. Mike Mansfield was another one of our Montana figures who played on the national stage. He first was elected to U.S. Congress in 1943, displacing Jeanette Rankin. And then in 1953, he was elected to the U.S. Senate, where he stayed until 1977. Mansfield served 16 years as the majority leader. Still holds the record for longest running majority leader in Congress. He was a major player in a lot of those big events of the 60s and 70s, Civil Rights Act, nuclear test ban treaty, diplomatic recognition of China, was also one of the first opponents to our involvement in Vietnam. And then he went on to become our ambassador to Japan. And through, I believe it was the Carter, Reagan, and most of the first Bush administration, Mansfield was a Democrat and was the only Democrat to keep his post when Reagan took office. Kind of a testament to the respect that people had for him. He was an excellent ambassador and diplomat, known for getting both sides of the aisle to work together. And he is in the statue with his wife Maureen. He passed away in 2001 at the age of 98, and his wife Maureen had passed away about 10 months before that. He was asked if they could put a statue up of him in the Capitol building to commemorate his service to Montana, and he said, of course, but only if you put Maureen with me. Now we are standing in the House chamber, House of Representatives, on the 3rd floor. And we're also in the 1912 part of the building now. You can tell by the white Vermont marble that surrounds us. Also in this room we have, we have 100 representatives that are elected for 2-year terms. And we have term limits in Montana, so our representatives can only serve 4 terms in a 16-year period. Our senators are elected for 4-year terms and then can only serve 2 terms in a 16-year period. The legislature meets every other year, odd-numbered years for about 90 days, January to April usually, and they work 6 days a week, but you really can't become a career politician in Montana because they just meet biannually, but it tends to work out. Montana was able to maintain a surplus in their budget all through these recession years. The highlight of the room, of course, is the Charlie Russell painting. You'll notice it is the only other artwork, the only piece of artwork in this room. Charles M. Russell is considered to be one of the foremost Western artists of all time, and this is considered to be, by some, his best work, but it is by far the largest piece he ever did. He painted this in his studio in Great Falls. He had to add 4 logs to the top of his cabin to accommodate the size of it, which he had to pay for. And in 1912, when he was hired, there were still a lot of people who didn't feel he was quite the caliber of artist that deserved this position. The governor had visited him in January of 1912. He had a July 1st deadline, and he hadn't even started. His was the largest commission, and he had a trip to New York planned and something else, and so the governor was a little bit nervous. And he started somewhere at the beginning of April and had it done 3 days early. It measures about 25 feet by 12 feet. And he also surprised a lot of people when he unveiled the painting. Everyone knew the title of it was Lewis and Clark Meeting the Indians at Ross's Hole. But nowhere in the foreground of our painting do Lewis and Clark appear. Our title characters have actually been pushed off to the background on the right. And Russell does this sort of as a way to remind the viewer that even though Lewis and Clark have gone down in history as these guys that discovered the West, they were visitors in 1805. Very much visitors, and there were hundreds of thousands of people already living here. The history is in the walls. It's in the desks that our lawmakers work at when they're here. How many different hands have touched these, and all of the progress and where we've come from. I think having that history present serves as a reminder to the people that work here every day, the people that visit, and our lawmakers to continue that tradition, to uphold those values and that idea of what it is to be a Montanan.